Picture this. Somewhere in the boring depths of space, floating in a station that looks like a chrome donut had a baby with a government building, sits the Galactic Confederation Council. 847 species, all living in perfect harmony. Well, mostly perfect. There's still that thing with the Zephyrians and their interpretive dance protests. But we don't talk about that. Ambassador Clixon adjusted his ceremonial tie. Yes, aliens wear ties now, don't ask me why, and cleared his throat in that way, that suggests he's about to say something incredibly important and equally boring. Clixon was what you'd get if you crossed a praying mantis with a middle manager who really cared about quarterly reports. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for people who use the word synergies unironically. Today marks our 200th anniversary of the Great Peace Accord. General Vorthak, who looked like someone had given a rhinoceros anger management issues and a military uniform, shifted uncomfortably in his reinforced chair. Vorthak was the kind of paranoid that made other paranoids say, "Dude, maybe dial it back a notch." "Ambassador," Vorthak interrupted, his voice like gravel in a blender, "shouldn't we be focusing on our defense protocols? What if they wake up?" A collective shiver ran through the council chamber. 847 different species, and they all had the same reaction to those two words, "they wake up." Clixon's eye twitched. "General, we've been over this. The humans are in hibernation. Deep hibernation. The kind of hibernation that makes bears look like insomniacs. They've been quiet for 2 centuries, and they're going to stay that way, because nobody, and I mean nobody, is stupid enough to wake them up. See, here's the thing about humans that made the entire galaxy collectively wet their various forms of pants. They were terrifying. Not in the traditional we'll eat your face way, but in the much more disturbing we'll reorganize your entire civilization and somehow make it better while being incredibly smug about its way. The stories were legendary. Humans had swept through the galaxy like a cosmic cleaning service, leaving behind improved infrastructure, better trade routes, and traumatized alien populations who couldn't figure out if they'd been conquered or helped. It was the most polite invasion in galactic history, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. "Remember the Bulgarian incident?" Vorthak muttered, his 3 eyes darting around the room. "They tried to negotiate with the humans. The humans gave them a 30-slide presentation on optimizing your planetary resources for sustainable growth. The Bulgarians surrendered after slide 7, or the mechanical uprising of Sector 12, another council member chimed in. The robots declared war on their creators. The humans showed up with team-building exercises and conflict resolution workshops. The robots ended up apologizing to everyone and started a support group." Clixon slammed his gavel, which was shaped like a small peace dove, because even their judicial tools were aggressively non-violent. "Enough. The humans are asleep. They have been asleep for 200 years. They went into what they called extended R&R after their last diplomatic mission, and they haven't been heard from since. The universe is finally peaceful." The irony, of course, was completely lost on them. The most feared species in the galaxy had brought peace by the simple act of taking a nap. Now, while the Galactic Council was busy patting themselves on the back for maintaining 2 centuries of peace, Captain Rex Blunderton was about to single-handedly end it. And yes, his name really was Blunderton. His parents either had a wicked sense of humor or the worst fortune-telling skills in the galaxy. Captain Blunderton commanded the exploration vessel Accidental Consequences, though everyone just called it the Oops because, well, you'll see. He was the kind of guy who looked at warning labels and thought challenge accepted. Young, confident, and possessed of that special brand of stupidity that only comes from never having faced real consequences for anything. "Navigator fumbles, set course for the restricted zone," Blunderton announced, straightening his captain's jacket that was probably ordered from Space Amazon. Navigator Fumbles, whose real name was actually Todd, but anxiety had a way of redefining people, nearly choked on his space coffee. "Captain, sir, that's the Sol system. That's where the humans are. Sleeping. We have 17 different regulations that say we can't go there, and I've memorized all of them, because I have trouble sleeping and regulations help with my anxiety." "Relax, Fumbles," Blunderton said, waving his hand dismissively. "Those regulations are 200 years old. Ancient history. Besides, I've been reading up on these humans, and honestly, I think the galaxy's been punked." Engineer Breakstuff looked up from whatever he was currently in the process of breaking. Today it appeared to be the coffee machine. Again. Breakstuff was the kind of engineer who could fix anything, but only after accidentally making it worse first. "Captain, didn't the humans once make an entire star system switch to renewable energy by asking really pointed questions about their carbon footprint?" "Propaganda," Blunderton scoffed. "Look, I've got a date tonight with Lieutenant Sparkles from the Andromedan fleet, and she thinks I'm some boring explorer who's never done anything interesting. What better way to impress her than being the captain who proved the human myths were just bedtime stories? Fumbles was now nervously chewing his stylus. Sir, what if you're wrong? What if we wake them up and they decide to help us with our career development? I heard they invented something called a performance review. Fumbles, buddy pal, my anxiety-riddled friend, Blunderton said, putting on his most condescending smile. Trust me. I've done the research. Humans were just really good at psychological warfare. They probably made up half those stories themselves. Now, what's the worst that could happen if we accidentally send a little ping toward their system? The universe, it should be noted, has a sense of humor. A terrible, terrible sense of humor. Breakstuff, in his infinite wisdom, decided this was the perfect moment to fix the communications array, which in Breakstuff terms meant taking it apart, losing several critical components, and then putting it back together with spare parts from the vending machine. Oops, Breakstuff said, which was his catchphrase for a reason. I think I might have cross-wired the greeting protocol with the emergency beacon system. What does that mean? Blunderton asked, though something in the back of his mind was starting to suggest this might not end well. Well, Breakstuff said, consulting a manual he was holding upside down, instead of sending Lieutenant Sparkles a cute hello message, we just broadcast a galactic emergency signal directly to Earth, asking for immediate assistance with what the computer is calling a critical diplomatic crisis. The bridge fell silent, except for the sound of Fumbles hyperventilating into a paper bag he kept for these exact occasions. Can we unsend it? Blunderton asked weakly. That's not how space works, Captain. Fumbles wheezed from inside his bag. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Janet Ironside was having what she considered a perfectly reasonable Tuesday morning. She was sitting in her favorite chair, wearing her favorite Galaxy's HFY mom mug, a gift from the Centauri colonies after she helped them organize their filing system, when the emergency beacon started blaring. Admiral Ironside was the kind of human who could make a cup of tea sound like a military operation, and somehow make you feel grateful for the privilege. She had the unique ability to be simultaneously the most helpful and most terrifying person in any room, often without changing her expression. Well, that's interesting, she said, taking a sip of her coffee while reviewing the incoming message. Looks like someone's having a diplomatic crisis and needs our help. Commander Pete Walsh, her second-in-command, looked up from his crossword puzzle. Pete was the kind of guy who could negotiate peace treaties while simultaneously explaining why your approach to conflict resolution needed work. Ma'am, didn't we agree to take a break from galactic affairs? You said, and I quote, Pete, I'm tired of helping civilizations that don't appreciate constructive feedback. That was 200 years ago, Pete. I'm feeling refreshed now. Admiral Ironside stood up and stretched. Besides, they sent an emergency beacon. It would be rude not to respond. Fire up the engines, and let's go see what's wrong. What the Galaxy didn't understand about humans was that they'd never been hibernating. They'd just been really into binge-watching their stories. 200 years of catching up on shows, organizing their planetary libraries, and having long philosophical discussions about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. The answer was yes, but only if you asked nicely. The human fleet emerged from Earth's system like a helpful plague. Their ships were painted in cheerful colors with names like constructive criticism, friendly advice, and we're here to help whether you like it or not. Each vessel was equipped with the most terrifying weapons known to the galaxy: suggestion boxes, feedback forms, and comprehensive improvement plans. This is Admiral Ironside of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, came the transmission that made every alien in a 50 light-year radius break out in a cold sweat. We received your emergency beacon. We're not angry, just disappointed that you felt you couldn't come to us sooner with your problems. The phrase "we're not angry, just disappointed" hit the galactic consciousness like a psychic tsunami. It was the most devastating thing any species could say to another, and humans wielded it like a weapon of mass guilt. Don't worry, the transmission continued. We're bringing care packages and a comprehensive analysis of what went wrong here. We've also prepared a presentation on effective communication strategies for interstellar relations. I think you're really going to benefit from it. Back on the Oops, Captain Blunderton was experiencing what psychologists call the full realization of consequences. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster, except the disaster was his career, his dignity, and possibly his species' continued existence. They're offering to help us, Fumbles whispered, his voice barely audible. They want to help us with our problems. They're bringing presentations. Breakstuff had given up all pretense of fixing anything, and was now just holding random tools while staring at the communication console. Captain, I think they're also asking if we've considered implementing a buddy system for our crew assignments. The human ships approached with the inexorable certainty of an intervention staged by the universe's most aggressively caring relatives. Each vessel broadcast helpful tips, encouraging messages, and what appeared to be a galaxy-wide sign-up sheet for something called Conflict Resolution Workshop Wednesdays. Back at Galactic Council headquarters, Ambassador Clixon was experiencing what his therapist would later classify as a complete structural breakdown of his worldview. The emergency alerts were coming in faster than he could read them, each one more terrifying than the last. "Sir," his assistant wheezed, holding a tablet that seemed to be smoking slightly. "The humans have established what they're calling improvement stations in 17 different sectors. They're offering free consultations on government efficiency." Clixon's left eye had developed a twitch that spelled out "help me" in Morse code. What kind of consultations? Well, they've already helped the Regalian Empire streamline their tax collection process. The Regalians are reporting a 40% increase in efficiency and what the humans called improved citizen satisfaction metrics. The Regalian Emperor is apparently in therapy now. General Vorthak burst through the doors, his armor clanking like a one-man marching band having an anxiety attack. "Clixon, they've sent us a gift basket." "A what now?" "A gift basket. With muffins. And a note that says we heard you've been under a lot of stress lately. Let's talk about implementing some wellness programs for your staff." The gift basket sat on Clixon's desk like an unexploded bomb made of baked goods and good intentions. The muffins looked delicious, which somehow made them more terrifying. There was also a small card with a smiley face that said, "Have you considered meditation, sir?" The assistant continued. "They've also scheduled mandatory fun activities for the entire Galactic Council. Something called a trust fall exercise followed by what they're calling a constructive feedback circle." Clixon stared at the muffins. The muffins seemed to stare back. Did anyone ask them to do this?" "No, sir, but according to their message they've identified several areas where our organization could benefit from what they call synergistic optimization of interpersonal dynamics." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the humans were spreading their particular brand of helpful chaos with the efficiency of a well-organized hurricane. Admiral Ironside had divided her fleet into what she called assistance task forces, each specializing in different types of help that nobody had requested. The Zephyrian homeworld received a visit from the cultural sensitivity specialists, who arrived with PowerPoint presentations about expressing your artistic vision through productive channels, and why interpretive dance protests might be counterproductive to your political goals. The Zephyrian leader, after sitting through a 3-hour workshop on alternative methods of political expression, was found sobbing in a supply closet, muttering something about constructive criticism and action items. The Bulgarian Trade Federation got the economic efficiency team, who took one look at their trade routes, and immediately started reorganizing everything with the terrifying competence of someone who actually knew what they were doing. "You see," explained Commander Walsh to the traumatized Bulgarian trade minister, "your current shipping routes are creating unnecessary bottlenecks. We've prepared a comprehensive restructuring plan that will increase your profit margins by 60% while reducing environmental impact. We've also included a bonus section on workplace morale improvement." The Bulgarian minister was last seen rocking back and forth in his office, staring at an efficiency chart while whispering, "But we never asked for 60%. Back on the Oops, Captain Blunderton was receiving his own personal dose of human helpfulness. The humans had somehow managed to hack into their ship's systems, not maliciously of course, but because they'd noticed some suboptimal crew performance indicators, and wanted to help. "Captain Blunderton," came Admiral Ironside's voice through the communicator, with that tone that made grown aliens consider career changes. "We've reviewed your recent decision-making patterns, and we're a little concerned. We'd like to schedule a one-on-one mentoring session to discuss your leadership development opportunities." Fumbles had progressed from hyperventilating into a paper bag to hyperventilating into a small cardboard box. "Captain, they've sent us a reading list. 17 books on responsible command decisions and something called the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Space Captains." Breakstuff looked up from the corner where he'd been quietly having what appeared to be an existential crisis. "They also fixed our coffee machine. It works perfectly now. It's terrifying." The coffee machine, indeed, was now producing the most perfect cup of coffee any of them had ever tasted, which somehow made the whole situation infinitely worse. It was as if the humans had weaponized competence. "And sir," Fumbles continued, his voice barely a whisper, "they want to implement something called a buddy system for our crew. They've assigned each of us a human mentor who will provide ongoing support and feedback." The human ships continued their approach, broadcasting messages of encouragement, helpful reminders about proper space safety protocols, and what appeared to be a playlist of motivational songs for personal growth that somehow made everyone within listening range feel simultaneously inspired and vaguely guilty about their life choices. It was during the galaxy's collective nervous breakdown that Admiral Ironside finally realized something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. She was sitting in her command chair reviewing the psychological profiles her crew had compiled on the various alien species they'd been helping when the pieces started falling into place. "Pete," she said, setting down her universe's most helpful Admiral mug, another gift from grateful colonies. "Why is everyone acting like we're about to declare war on them?" Commander Walsh looked up from his tablet, where he'd been drafting a presentation titled Effective Delegation Strategies for Overwhelmed Space Captains. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "I mean the Regalian Emperor literally fainted when we offered to help optimize their agricultural output. The Zephyrian Prime Minister tried to surrender to us before we even finished explaining our cultural exchange program. And don't get me started on the Bulgarian Trade Federation's response to our economic efficiency audit." "Well," Pete said thoughtfully, "maybe they're just not used to unsolicited assistance." Admiral Ironside stood up and began pacing, which was never a good sign for anyone within a 50 light-year radius. When Admiral Ironside started pacing, civilizations started preemptively improving their customer service policies. "Pete, pull up the galactic historical records from the last 200 years. I want to know what these people have been telling each other about us." What they found was a masterpiece of cosmic misunderstanding that would have been hilarious if it weren't so tragically comprehensive. The galaxy had spent 2 centuries turning human diplomatic missions into horror stories. "Listen to this," Admiral Ironside said, reading from the official galactic archives. "The human conquest of Rigel 7, a terrifying display of organizational warfare that left the entire planet running on time and under budget. The humans deployed their most devastating weapon, a comprehensive project management system that made everyone's job easier and more fulfilling. The psychological trauma was so severe that productivity increased by 30%. Pete whistled low. "Ma'am, here's one about the Andromedan trade dispute. Quote, the humans arrived with their most feared negotiator, who subjected both sides to a collaborative problem-solving session that resulted in a mutually beneficial agreement. The horror of finding common ground left both parties scarred but inexplicably satisfied with the outcome. Oh, this is rich," Admiral Ironside continued. "The great mechanical uprising of Sector 12, the humans' response was so terrifying that the robots stopped their rebellion mid-conquest to attend mandatory team-building exercises. The organic beings and their mechanical overlords ended up forming a support group for healthy conflict resolution." The truth was dawning on Admiral Ironside like a sunrise made of pure irony. The galaxy's most feared military force had been conducting the most polite, helpful and aggressively caring diplomatic missions in cosmic history, and somehow everyone had interpreted their kindness as an elaborate form of psychological warfare. "Pete, are you telling me that for 200 years every time we've tried to help someone, they've documented it as an act of strategic intimidation?" "It gets better, ma'am. According to this report from the Centauri colonies, our Helpful Hints for Better Governance pamphlet was classified as advanced propaganda techniques and is still studied in their military academies as an example of subtle psychological manipulation." Admiral Ironside sat back down heavily. "We weren't conquering anyone, we were just trying to be helpful." "Apparently, ma'am, being helpful is considered an act of war in some sectors." The realization hit her like a cosmic freight train carrying a cargo of pure absurdity. Humanity had accidentally become the galaxy's boogeyman by being too good at helping people. Their reputation for being terrifyingly effective wasn't based on violence or conquest, it was based on their uncanny ability to show up uninvited, identify problems nobody knew they had, and solve them with devastating efficiency. "Ma'am," Pete said quietly, "there's more. According to these records, the reason we went into hibernation wasn't because we were tired of diplomacy. The galaxy collectively decided we were too dangerous to interact with, and essentially stopped talking to us. We didn't choose isolation, we got ghosted by the entire universe." Admiral Ironside stared at the data, processing the cosmic joke that had been playing out for 2 centuries. "So when we stopped receiving diplomatic requests, we assumed everyone was doing fine and went back to our own business." "Yes, ma'am. And apparently, our withdrawal from galactic affairs was interpreted as strategic patience. The galaxy has been living in fear of the day we'd decide to help them again." Back on the bridge of the Oops, Captain Blunderton was having his own moment of horrible clarity. The humans had sent him a personal message, not threatening, not demanding, just disappointed. "Captain Blunderton," Admiral Ironside's voice came through the communicator with that special tone that made people want to confess crimes they hadn't committed. "We've been reviewing the circumstances that led to your emergency beacon. We understand that everyone makes mistakes, and we're not here to judge. We're here to help you learn from this experience and grow as both a leader and a person. The words learn and grow hit Blunderton like a motivational brick to the face. Are you going to execute me? Execute you? Admiral Ironside sounded genuinely confused. Captain, why would we execute you? You made an honest mistake. We've prepared a personalized development plan to help you build better decision-making skills. We think you have a lot of potential, you just need some guidance. Fumbles had progressed beyond hyperventilating and had reached a zen-like state of pure panic. They think he has potential, he whispered to break stuff. That's the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Captain, Admiral Ironside continued. We're also implementing a new mentorship program for young officers. We think you'd be perfect for our Learning from Mistakes workshop series. It's completely voluntary, of course, but we really think you'd benefit from it. The phrase completely voluntary but we really think you'd benefit was perhaps the most sophisticated form of gentle coercion ever developed by any species. It was like being hugged by a steamroller made of good intentions. 6 months later, the galaxy had settled into what historians would later call the Great Adjustment Period, though most beings just referred to it as that time the humans came back and made everything weird. Ambassador Clixon sat in the newly renovated Galactic Council chambers. The humans had insisted on better lighting and ergonomic seating after one look at their suboptimal workspace conditions, staring at an agenda that made his soul weep. Today's items included mandatory trust falls, a potluck lunch where everyone had to bring something from their home planet, and a presentation by Admiral Ironside titled Synergistic Approaches to Interspecies Cooperation, a Framework for Sustainable Galactic Harmony. I used to be a respected diplomat, Clixon muttered to General Vorthak, who was wearing a name tag that said, "Hi, I'm Vorthak and I'm working on my listening skills." At least you didn't get assigned to the Conflict Resolution Committee, Vorthak replied, his 3 eyes darting nervously around the room. Do you know what humans consider healthy disagreement? They want us to use I feel statements. I feel like conquering something, but apparently that's not the kind of feeling they meant. The humans had indeed joined the Galactic Council, though joined was perhaps too gentle a word. They'd arrived with comprehensive reform proposals, efficiency audits, and a disturbing amount of enthusiasm for committee work. Nobody had actually invited them to become members, but somehow they'd ended up with voting rights, administrative oversight, and what Admiral Ironside cheerfully called advisory privileges. Attention everyone, Admiral Ironside announced, standing at the front of the chamber with a smile that could power a small star system. Let's start today's session with our daily affirmations. Repeat after me. I am a valuable member of the galactic community, and my unique perspective contributes to our collective success. The chamber filled with the reluctant mumbling of 847 species being forced to acknowledge their self-worth. It was possibly the most surreal sound in the known universe. The humans had discovered that their true superpower wasn't their efficiency or their problem-solving abilities, it was their uncanny talent for making everyone just uncomfortable enough to agree with whatever they suggested, purely to make the awkwardness stop. It was psychological warfare disguised as team building, and it was devastatingly effective. Now Admiral Ironside continued, consulting her tablet with the intensity of someone planning a military campaign. Let's discuss the implementation of our galaxy-wide buddy system. Each species will be paired with a compatible partner for mutual support and growth opportunities. The Zephyrians had been paired with the Rigelians, leading to what the humans called a beautiful cultural exchange, and what everyone else called interpretive dance tax audits. The Bulgarians were working with the Centaurians on something called collaborative trade optimization, which sounded peaceful until you realized it involved spreadsheets. General Vorthak raised his hand reluctantly. Admiral, what if we don't want a buddy? Admiral Ironside's smile somehow became even brighter, which was scientifically impossible but emotionally devastating. Oh Vorthak, that's exactly the kind of thinking that shows you need a buddy the most. We've paired you with Ambassador Clixon. You're going to work on communication exercises together. Clixon and Vorthak exchanged a look that conveyed several thousand years of diplomatic experience being reduced to role-playing scenarios and icebreaker games. Meanwhile, Captain Blunderton had become something of a celebrity in the worst possible way. The humans had turned his catastrophic mistake into a case study for their learning from failure workshops, which meant he was now required to travel around the galaxy sharing his story at mandatory professional development seminars. And that's how I accidentally ended 200 years of peace. Blunderton concluded his presentation to a room full of junior officers who looked like they were contemplating career changes. But as Admiral Ironside taught me, failure is just success that hasn't found its purpose yet. Navigator Fumbles had been assigned to something called the Anxiety Management and Personal Growth Initiative, which involved meditation sessions, breathing exercises, and regular check-ins with a human counselor who had an unsettling amount of patience. Fumbles was actually getting better, which somehow made the whole situation more disturbing. Engineer Breakstuff had been enrolled in the Constructive Problem-Solving Academy, where humans were teaching him to break things in more productive ways. He was now accidentally fixing problems, instead of creating them, which violated everything he understood about his role in the universe. The galaxy had also been introduced to human concepts that had no translation in most languages, but were now being forcibly implemented anyway. Work-life balance was causing existential crises among species that had never considered the possibility that work and life were separate things. Emotional intelligence was being taught to beings who communicated through chemical emissions and quantum fluctuations. Most disturbing of all was the Human Book Club initiative. Admiral Ironside had somehow convinced, or perhaps psychologically maneuvered, the entire Galactic Council into reading the same book each month and discussing it over what she called facilitated dialogue sessions. This month's selection was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Civilizations, and the discussion questions were more terrifying than any weapon ever deployed. How can your species better align its cultural values with sustainable growth objectives? Was apparently a normal thing to ask civilizations that had been doing just fine for millennia. The worst part, Clixon confided to his therapist, yes, the humans had introduced galaxy-wide mental health services, because of course they had, is that it's working. Our efficiency ratings are up 40%, interspecies conflicts are down to historic lows, and everyone's reporting higher job satisfaction. I hate how much better everything is. The universe had learned that humanity's true horror wasn't conquest or destruction, it was improvement. They were the galaxy's unwanted life coaches, armed with statistical analysis and an inexhaustible supply of motivational quotes. As Admiral Ironside stood before the Galactic Council, preparing to unveil her latest initiative, something called Galactic Wellness Wednesdays, she reflected on how perfectly everything had worked out. The galaxy was more efficient, more harmonious, and more productive than ever before. And the best part was, nobody could complain about it, because technically, they were all much happier. The universe had learned a valuable lesson: never wake the humans. Not because they're dangerous in the traditional sense, but because they'll reorganize your entire existence and somehow make you grateful for it. The new galactic motto, printed on motivational posters throughout the known universe, read, "Resistance is futile. Personal growth is mandatory." And in the smallest possible print at the bottom, brought to you by the Terran Diplomatic Corps. "We're here to help, whether you like it or not." Captain Blunderton, now a reluctant poster child for productive failure, was already planning his next adventure. After all, the humans had taught him that every mistake was just an opportunity in disguise. The universe collectively shuddered and reached for another aspirin.